Hi, everybody. Welcome back to Psychedelics Today. This is Joe Moore coming in from Breckenridge, Colorado. Today on the show, we have Kim Dudine. Kim, I met over at a beautiful conference in Arizona a few months back, and we had a really fun time chatting, getting to know each other, and really just interested to record a podcast as soon as we started chatting. So we did it, and this is it. It took only a few months, and yeah, we get into kind of like the relationship to cannabis, different kind of relationships to plant and plant materials and entities, and yeah, just different ways of knowing. So, hold on, this isn't your normal kind of clinical podcast. We get into a lot of other ways of knowing, sensory apparatus like feeling, interior perception, etc. And I think there's some valuable stuff here. So yeah, Kim's got a long-standing relationship with cannabis and pretty deep relationship to some plant psychedelics now too. So yeah, we cover a lot of ground. So the conference was Trailblazers, and there's a Trailblazers event coming up in New York. I wish I was going. And also in Ojai, California. I wish I was going to that too. But too many things on the schedule. So I'll be back to Trailblazers for sure. Just going to take me a minute. So, all right, everybody. I guess we'll run some ads and we'll get into the podcast, and we'll see you on the other side. Thanks for tuning in, everybody.
Horizons PBC, producer of the largest and longest running annual gathering of the psychedelic community in the world, is producing the 15th Horizons Perspectives on Psychedelics conference in New York City this fall. This 5-day psychedelic learning event will take place at the New York Academy of Medicine and at Cooper Union's Great Hall from October the 12th through the 16th. For more information on the conference, the programs, the speakers, and to register, please visit horizonspbc.com/New York. Use the code psychedelics-today-NY-15 to get 15% off. Hi everybody, David here with a quick ad letting you know next week, July 27th, I'll be at the Trailblazers gathering in New York City. And Kim Dudine, today's guest on the podcast, has very, very gratefully said that anyone can use this 25% discount code to come at a reduced price next week. The code is TBFriends, and the TB stands for Trailblazers, TB Friends, and it gets you 25% off. So I hope to see some of you there.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Psychedelics Today. This is Joe Moore, and I'm joined by Kim Dudine. Kim, how you doing today?
I'm great, brother. How are you?
Doing pretty good. So, this is the first time you've been on the show. I'm excited to introduce you to everybody. We got linked up through this Trailblazers conference that you helped produce, and I think what was our first phone call? I was kind of getting vetted. See if I was cool enough to join.
Yeah, that's typically the process.
I'm glad I passed the test. It was a really interesting and amazing experience for me. So, thanks for putting it on.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to get you on. It's, we're going to talk about a lot more than just Trailblazers, but yeah, is that a good place to start, or do we want to talk about you first?
Yeah, I mean, wherever you want to start, that's obviously the natural connective tissue here. But we can absolutely dive into Trailblazers and.
Well, let's do you first. So, like, where you come from, New York. Like, how did you start engaging in this cannabis and psychedelic topic?
Yeah, sure. Well, so I'm South African. I moved to New York when I was 9 years old. Really grew up in an environment that really lent itself to curiosity. My parents didn't really have an ideology that they forced upon us. And, my mom was an energy healer. So I was always kind of introduced to what society calls alternative, but what I call, the ancient wisdom that we've all kind of been separated from. So, the quote unquote alternative ways of living life were introduced to me early on. And, I was always interested and very connected to nature and to myself. And then, at 19, I lost my fiance was killed in Iraq, and I just did not have the tools or the connection to move through that grief, to move through that life initiation. And, I was a college kid, so we all know, what the societal norms are for that in America, especially. And it was just heavy drinking for numbers of years and not really being able to be vulnerable and connect on the level that requires, to heal something of that magnitude. So I had kind of always preferred plant medicine over drinking. And once I graduated, I really realized that, I was projecting a lot of my own unhealed hurt and my own unhealed trauma, and really needed a different way to kind of work through what I had experienced. And, I always say death is my master teacher in this life. And then plant medicine came in and really rounded out that curriculum and allowed me to kind of step outside of like a very trauma informed brain and use plant medicine to kind of get outside this very myopic vantage point that really only saw life as something that, had great potential to hurt me. So moving through that in my early 20s, it just became so clear that we're kind of living in this inverse reality where we're, not really taught connection. We're not taught vulnerability. We're taught that, having fun and a good time is to go out to the bars and drink and numb ourselves. And I just knew that wasn't going to be the path for me. So, cannabis has always been such an ally for me. And I worked in energy and environment for about 8 or 9 years, and then just realized, during the pandemic, I wasn't really traveling to these countries that I was designing projects in anymore. And it felt like a very natural end to that part of my life. And I was kind of sitting in my parents' apartment in Florida one day and was just like, I know that I'm powerful and I know that I'm a co-creator of my reality. So how do I really align my external life with the internal truths that I've cultivated over the past couple of years? And honestly, just started writing down how I wanted to be a steward of plant medicine and how I wanted to democratize access to it. And even, the many conversations I had with my parents about how much it had supported me, there was still so much stigma from them and kind of not an understanding of how this could be something that's super supportive to the mind, body, and spirit. And really just wrote down a list of all the things I wanted to manifest in a career. And a month later, I went on a hike with my really good friend Ryan here in San Francisco, and he had just been to Trailblazer Sedona and was telling me about the magic that was there and the people that he met. And yeah, I knew I had to get involved. So I kind of begged him to let me call Tyler Waxstein, one of the 3 co-founders of Trailblazers. And Tyler and I just hopped on a call and just had one of those instantaneous connections. And of course, talked about career aspirations, but it was so much more genuine and deep than that. And it just was like this natural click that, they were really calling in more support. Trailblazers was rapidly growing. And, Tyler also wanted to bring in the consciousness aspect. And it was just like this perfect fit. And yeah, the rest is history.
And Tyler, I met, who's part of the kind of incubator lab in the Bay. Open Nest, is it?
Yeah. So, Open Nest Labs is a cannabis venture studio. It's developed, a leading brand building platform of supply chain partners, distribution channels. And it's really just a team of executives to, with the mission of kind of authentically integrating valuable culture, communities, audience, into the regulated cannabis market. And, Tyler Tyler's the CEO of ONL, but was, before Open Nest Labs started, he founded Trailblazers with his 2 friends at Summit Series, which was a similar event series, networking series that he and his 2 other friends, David Denberg and Pete Gross, worked at for many years. And they kind of saw a white space in the market for cannabis and community, and kind of took all their collective experience. Tyler was an early investor in cannabis. David is just a culture expert and a master at generating community. Pete, runs his own entertainment and production company. So it was just this perfect mix of skill sets and network to to bring something unique to the market that didn't really exist. Of course, cannabis events now are ubiquitous, but really what we try to do is create a community that is driven entirely by an authentic desire to see everyone succeed. And then how do we get, those influential change makers that can actually move the needle, that actually have impact and influence across the whole ecosystem, whether that's you're a CEO of a top brand, of an MSO, you're, an entrepreneur within a company that can have a lot of impact on moving or stewarding the cannabis and psychedelics industry in the right direction, whether that's in the sustainability viewpoint, if that's on the policy side, if that's on the science and research side, if that's, on the diversity and equity side. So it was really about how do we create this circle of trust of people that are really good at what they do, but even better at who they are. And Trailblazers was born from there.
Very cool. I like it. And having that lineage from Summit Series is kind of interesting too, and in its own right. But yeah, just this really authentic vibe that I got there. I really picked up on some special stuff. And then, the psychedelic thing, do you kind of how would you describe your kind of relationship to the psychedelic world at this point?
I mean, it's constantly burgeoning, right? It's kind of reflective of the consciousness of psychedelics. It's always, there's nothing ever stays the same. Even last year, I actually paused my relationship with cannabis because it was bringing up some anxiety in me that I had never experienced in my life before. So it was interesting for me to really start to put my relationship with cannabis to the side and then start to explore other master plants and really build this beautiful reverence for the spirit of these plants and seeing them as not just, recreational fun things to do, but actually these massively beautiful and important tools that this planet has, for some reason, gifted us to explore our consciousness and to, get a vantage point outside of just the really loud ego. But my relationship with psychedelics has been a really, really slow burn, pun intended. My first experience with Psilocybin was a couple years ago in the Redwoods in a beautiful setting with my partner. And, I had just come off of living in a van for a while and reading Michael Pollan's book, How to Change Your Mind. And I really took it slow because from my grief and from healing, I knew my mind very intricately and intimately. I'd been meditating for years. I have a very, very spiritual way of living my life. I understand that I am so much more than my mind, but I also knew that my mind was still very much wanting to analyze and quantitatively assess the risk. And so I was providing my mind with kind of all the quantitative data behind what psychedelics are, how they work with your body, and was really building like this cognitive, intellectual relationship with the plants before actually sitting with them. And then, I think the launching off point was, for me, I went to a very, very beautiful, life-changing, one of those just turning points in your life. I went to a retreat in Mount Shasta a couple of years ago and had my first very sacred, intentional psilocybin journey. And that just blew the roof off of everything I knew to be true. It was, the first really, really deep journey with psilocybin. But it was also in a really safe community with beautiful, conscious women who were also looking to explore their consciousness and truth outside of what we've been told truth is. So it was just this massive kind of blowing the lid off of everything I had always kind of had an inclination was out there. And just, this 5-day retreat of connecting with women that were hungry to reconnect to this ancient wisdom that is in our DNA that, the current society kind of does everything it can to keep you not focused on. And ever since there, it's been this very gentle, sacred exploration with these plants. I hardly ever take psychedelics recreationally. It's always in a very sacred way. And for me, it's kind of always just been a necessity for me because I have, I do have this this kind of, this trauma still that I'm still unwiring and still unraveling and still really working really gently with. And I'm in no quote unquote rush to heal, but I am in this very expedited path to be of service. And I know that in order to be of service, we have to be able to serve ourselves first. And that's really what psychedelics has supported me on the past couple of years, is just helping to illuminate so many shadows in my psyche, helping me to understand that my brain is a beautiful computer, but a computer nonetheless, and can be programmed for good or bad. So psychedelics has really helped me rewire a lot of things towards love and towards trust and towards surrender and towards really connecting to the true benevolence of life. A lot of people on this planet are wired to believe that it is not safe to be here, and our nervous systems are all out of whack. And I think there's an exhaustion and there's so much unnecessary suffering, and psychedelics can kind of open that door and give you a temporary break from the mind's narratives that most of the time are not friendly. So psychedelics have just been such an ally for me to kind of do a massive and necessary pattern interrupt in the stories that I tell myself, and see that, I don't have to believe everything I think, and I can rewire my brain in order for me to perceive reality in a much more beautiful way than we're taught.
Now, you've been in the cannabis world much longer than I've been involved in it, and I'm kind of curious about the overlap. Like, cannabis is obviously really helpful for a lot of people medically, I think spiritually as well. But, how do you like to talk about cannabis, beyond kind of like the stereotypical view, Cheech Marin style?
Yeah, I mean,
not like I don't like Cheech.
Yeah, who doesn't love Cheech? Yeah, such a good question. And it's something that I've really been deliberate about talking about in a different way over the past couple of years, because there is that stoner culture, right, that we kind of have to counteract in some ways. And of course, all of this being said with the caveat that cannabis and all plant medicines included, everyone has a different relationship with them. Everyone has a different physical history, a different emotional history. So cannabis for me is medicine. For others, it might not be that. So I completely understand that everyone has a very different relationship and reaction to these plant medicines. But for me, I've been really intentional about this, especially over the past couple of years, is even when I share a joint with people, no matter if it's a stranger or someone that I'm really close with, I always ask that we just take a moment and really bless the plant and honor this plant. A lot of people which is beautiful, but a lot of people just, associate cannabis with enhancing a movie or enhancing a meal, or, just bringing in some more playfulness or laughter, which is medicine all in of itself and is all well and good. And like all other plant medicines, cannabis is kind of this really intelligent plant that will work with you and meet you where you are. And it's, for me, truly just as powerful as psychedelics if you have that intention of using it that way. And something I've seen across the board with psychedelics is, and you hear this all the time, and it might sound like a cliche, but intention is everything. And so a lot of what, I've been doing over the past few years is kind of sitting with cannabis and kind of being a way shower to show people that it is just as sacred and demands just as much reverence as, sitting in an ayahuasca ceremony. And I truly mean that, because if you can sit with this plant and truly connect to its intelligence, to me, cannabis holds the frequency of unity consciousness. When you share smoke with someone, you're kind of merging your energetic fields. You're all kind of operating on this unified frequency. And that is so, so powerful. It's what Bob Marley was tapping into. And it does get a bad rap for like, just kind of like this lazy deadbeat plant that, yeah, it doesn't really serve productivity or whatever extraneous values we've placed on what we should be pulling from these plants. But for me, cannabis is such an ally. It's a mood regulator. It's a connector. It makes me curious. It makes me creative. And it's just, for me, it's an elevator. So I really, truly feel that my frequency elevates, which is why I had such a complicated relationship with it last year, because it was actually bringing up, as I was working with it more sacredly, it was bringing up more anxiety, and it was very confusing for me. But what she was teaching me was, just like any other psychedelic, she was amplifying my own shit, right? So it wasn't the plant causing me to feel a certain way. She was just mirroring to me that there was still anxiety in my body that I needed to work through, and work through the crazy stories that my mind would kind of start to perpetuate. And so once I returned to the neutral witness, I would kind of intentionally sit with cannabis to see where the anxiety would come up. And I would watch these narratives come up. And I was like, wow, this is such a powerful plant. If you can truly be in a space of not attaching, meaning to any of the thoughts that are coming up, and believing the paranoia or the anxiety, and just kind of allowing it to be a teacher of, hey, anxiety is living in your chest, or hey, anxiety is living in your gut. And when you sit with me and you feel butterflies in your stomach, dig into that instead of pulling out, So yeah, I mean, cannabis has been such an ally, and I do see it as a psychedelic, and just as powerful as all these other psychedelics that people are reuniting with.
This isn't usually discussed, right? This is a big deal. We've been trying to bring it up on the show for a long time, using our mutual friend, Philip Wolf, as kind of an example of it. Rachel Carvalho with Ganjasana, cannabis yoga, and there's a number of other really cool things going on here. It's like legal in many states, internationally, far more accessible than LSD in terms of how scared is somebody when they look at it. So, I guess it depends on the person, but it's also, I hear these healing stories so much that it makes a lot of sense for me to want to bring it up on the show. I remember the first time I heard about it being used intentionally was in around, with really great care. It's around 2009. I met this older guy in Boston who once a week would have a really high dose smoke journey on his own, eyes closed. And he would, work through a lot of stuff. And, I challenge people, if you don't think it's intense enough or helpful enough, try to perhaps smoke a little bit and just lay down in bed and see what goes on in your body. Just do body scans and pay attention. Would you have any suggestions for somebody's like kind of first time checking inside with themselves with cannabis?
Yes. I mean, truly, cannabis is what got my meditation practice to where it is today. And how I really started working with it in an intentional way was using it as like this gentle enough mirror to my thoughts. As I said before, for me, plant medicine just amplifies whatever I'm experiencing. And your capacity to, no matter what is being brought up in your mind, your capacity to return to center and realize you're always in the position of the eternal witness. And even if it's just a 5-minute meditation, for 5 minutes, can you release any inclination in your body to believe the thoughts that are coming up? And what cannabis does is kind of amplify those thoughts. So if you're not used to, sitting in meditation, or if you're just, you haven't really practiced having, not being swept away by your thoughts. And by that, I mean, a thought comes up, you believe it, you get taken down the river, so to speak, of that thought or that narrative, and then your body has the whole pharmaceutical response and cocktails of hormones that are tied to whatever emotion is being triggered by this thought. What I kind of liken it to is, how capable are we of having a thought come up and kind of look at it like an anthropologist, and look at it like from this angle of just pure curiosity, and not at all that it holds truth. And even just, sitting and holding cannabis in your hand and connecting it to your heart and honoring this plant that has been an ally to the human race for thousands of years. And often, what I've learned in other larger plant medicine journeys is our greatest gift energetically to this world is our gratitude. And it seems like a jarring concept that is enough, when this planet is so abundantly providing for us. But truly, the energy and the frequency of our gratitude, these much more intelligent beings, plants, that is enough for them. So sitting with gratitude and just infusing this medicine that you're about to sit with your gratitude and with your kind of humble apprenticeship of being willing to say, show me what I'm missing. Show me what stories are running constantly in the back of my subconscious that are not serving me. And if you're capable, even just for a minute, to let go of believing or buying into those narratives, you can really, really start to create an opening for liberation, for cognitive liberation, because so many of us are just baited by the stories in our minds. And it's what keeps us in suffering. And, we now have the science that you can actually be addicted to your own suffering. Like physiologically, if your mind thinks a thought that makes you feel sad, you can then become addicted to those, cocktail of hormones your body produces when you're sad. So what cannabis does for me is kind of provides that pattern interruption and say, I don't actually have to rob myself of peace right now by buying into this narrative that was likely programmed years ago out of like a defense mechanism and served me. But there's just, you kind of constantly have to be doing cleanup in the stories that your mind is telling you. And cannabis really helped me with that, because a lot of people do think, cannabis makes me paranoid. Cannabis makes me feel anxiety. And it's like, well, no, she's just reflecting to you where those thoughts live in your body. And how willing are you to put up your hands and say, okay, maybe this is just a program in the computer of my brain that is just not serving me anymore. And what gratitude you can give to a plant for amplifying where your blind spots are.
Right. And this is actually really similar to my approach for intention setting. And I appreciate this cool overlap here, Kim. It's a hard reframe for a lot of folks, right?
Totally.
Because it's like, the doctor tells you to do this as opposed to check in with yourself and see where you're at.
Mm-hmm.
Very different. Yeah. And how do you, like, from your energy healing kind of perspective, do you ever get any really interesting insights on how the energy's working with these things?
Oh my gosh, yeah. How much time do you have?
Let's start with cannabis and then let's go to psilocybin after that.
Yeah. So yeah, I was kind of alluding to it earlier on, but to me, cannabis really holds unity consciousness. And it's this great unifier that regardless if you've been programmed to believe you're a Democrat or a Republican or you're this or you believe this, if you smoke a joint with someone, it has this capacity to just unify the conversation. And that's like what, that's the frequency we see in whale pods. That's the frequency we see when birds are flying together. It's the frequency that beehives hold, and they've actually been able to record it. It's the frequency of 932 hertz. So there's actually now, quantifiable frequency that is given off when this concept of unity consciousness is at play. And for me, the energetics of cannabis is to remind us of our interconnection, because we're in a crisis of believing all the mind stories. And we're in a crisis of individualism and a very myopic way of looking at the world. I'm Kim, I'm a 32-year-old female. These are the things I like. These are things I don't like. This is, we all have these stories that just pile and pile and pile on top of this identity construct. And cannabis just kind of, it's so beautiful because it's so playful, like there's so many other plant medicines that are way more challenging and kind of grab you by the scruff of your neck and demand that you look at your shit. But for me, cannabis is so accessible. It's this energy that is really willing to meet you where you are. And that why, I've heard many people, obviously we know it's been called the gateway drug, but it's really what I've always referred to as the gateway to consciousness. Cause it is like this gentle, playful frequency that is willing to meet you where you are and will at times confront you when you're ready for it. But yeah, there's times that I'm called to use cannabis as an ally in healing sessions and times where I'm not. And it's really just tapping into and honestly, I think it takes a lot to relinquish the ego's concept that we're the most intelligent being on this planet. I think everything is pointing to quite the opposite. So a lot of my energy healing, quote unquote, I always tell my clients or, brothers and sisters who offer me that amazing container to sit with them is I'm not doing any of the healing. And that was a huge thing that cannabis taught me was I'm just creating an energetic container where love and peace and bliss and higher frequency energies can move through more freely. And I really do believe we're moving out of the age of the guru. We're moving into Satguru, which means the collective guru, which means healing is an inside job and no healer, no external authority, no external force can walk you through your own journey. But we can absolutely create a really beautiful, high integrity, safe container for you to do that. And that's honestly what cannabis did for me, is create this energetic container where I could kind of meet harder feelings with compassion and with neutrality.
And like, if you had to compare and contrast like the psilocybin journey in cannabis or maybe even something like an ayahuasca, assuming you've tried ayahuasca at this point.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
All right. You want to get weird?
Sure thing.
Kind of, I get like this galactic frequency from psilocybin. It feels like a gift to this planet. Cannabis feels like this ancient ancestor that has learned how to thrive on this planet and is now gifting us all that evolutionary data and DNA. And of course, mushrooms and fungi are some of, if not the oldest sentient being on this planet. We know mycelium is the great connector. But to me, mushrooms and not just psilocybin, but mushrooms in and of itself have kind of mastered life because they don't take anything, right? They all eat decomposed matter. So they're way further than us on the evolutionary scale of being able to live within an ecosystem and take nothing from it, but provide so much value. And I really do believe that human beings are starting to sit with these plants because we don't have the time to take another billion years of abusing this planet. We need to actually now sit with and consume and ingest the frequency and the intelligence of these plants. And psilocybin to me just feels like it's honestly in another dimension. Feels like it's kind of evolved past like this third dimension time-space reality. And it's it's kind of plopped into our physical reality to open the doorway to higher dimensional realities and higher ways of being.
I like it. So you're not the only one that has these reflections, right? This is, I can't say totally common, but not rare, you know? Like, I remember having interesting conversations in 2008 and 2009 with a professional psychic, like a young lady, 23 years old, living in Boston. And her perspectives were quite interesting on psilocybin. At one point, in one of my more paranoid moments, Kim, I was like, are these things parasites on us? Like, and I'm like, in which way is that true? In which way is it not true? And I'm like, this is, you know, kind of like it's similar to the mycorrhizal relationship in forests. Like, they're taking very little relative to what they're giving.
Yeah.
So, like, you know, an interesting symbiote. And that's kind of how Paul Stamets talks about it now. It's like, this is a symbiotic relationship with this amazing class of life on the planet. And it can be a thing that can really help sustain us through some really hard times that are coming. Already here for a lot of people, but it's going to get harder, I think.
Totally. I mean, for me, it's such a, I think our biggest thing holding us back right now is our hubris in thinking that, you know, the way that we measure intelligence is the only way to measure intelligence. The 3 cones of our eyes that only see like one tiny % of the light spectrum is all there is. There's, what I always say to people is, you know, if I could leave you with one thing, is absolutely nothing is quote unquote normal and magic is real. And I know that triggers a lot of programming in people because that's what we've been programmed to think. But and we place so much value, right, in our society of how productive we are and how intellectual we can seem and how much we know. But really what we need is humility. Like, I don't think there's anything more humbling than walking through a redwood forest and seeing these beings that just have been standing there for hundreds, if not thousands of years, being of service to the ecosystem. Right. And then there's us. That's like, well, it can't type on a computer. So where's the intelligence? It's like this silly myopic, this silly myopic view of what intelligent life is. And I think the gifts of these plants are really showing us these shortcomings and that we're actually here to learn. And we're not the most evolved species or beings on this planet. And how humbling that is that we get to incarnate on this insanely biodiverse planet in the middle of an eternal reality, really. Again, nothing is normal. This is all, reality is just bizarre if we really want to talk about it. And just, come here to just be humble students of life and learn from all different types of beings. I think that's like really just the key, is just to humble ourselves and realize how little we actually know. And yes, these brains are so powerful and so beautiful, but they can only compute reality within very confined parameters. I mean, that's literally what your brain does is it has to put confinements and parameters around something to understand it. And that's why we can't really grasp that we live in this eternal reality. But what does help us connect to that is plant medicine. And no matter how deep of a plant medicine journey I've been on, there is always this eternal witness, consciousness, soul, whatever you want to call it, that's watching the experience. And it's so beautiful. The more and more I connect to that neutrality, the more and more I can bring that back into this physical reality when I am not on plant medicine. And I think that's the whole point, is to use plant medicines to kind of remind us or show us a doorway into a different energetic signature. And then how do we cultivate that soberly in our day-to-day lives? How do we bring that access point back into our day-to-day lives? And just to even bring it back to Trailblazers, that's the whole point of Trailblazers, is how do we create a new paradigm of obviously doing business, of networking, of connecting, but a new paradigm of doing everything. And I always say, like, how do we be reflective of the consciousness of the plant? How do we be playful and curious and authentic with each other? Because it doesn't matter if you're sitting in ayahuasca ceremonies and getting all this beautiful intelligence downloaded, and then you're not able to embody that frequency in your day-to-day life. That's the whole point, right? Is to bring all this intelligence into our day-to-day interactions, and to bring the kindness back, and to realize, actually, a massive download that I've got is that the next phase of our evolution is realizing the heart intelligence. We focused so much on the logical linear mind, but we don't even pay homage to the fact that there's neurons in our heart, and that our hearts have these massive electromagnetic fields that can change the energy of a room. So just by walking into a room and feeling gratitude and kindness in your heart, you can be the tide that rises all boats, if you're willing to embody this beautiful gift that we've been given from these plants.
So the last bunch of days, I encountered a lot of very kind people, Kim, and I'm just like constantly in awe when I just get these like bursts of kindness thrown at me, and it's incredible. And it's like I catch myself talking about how kind people are more than almost anything else the last couple of weeks. Not sure what that is, but I like it.
Yeah, I mean, it's all that matters, right? It really is all that matters. And that's why, Joe, honestly, I love whenever I see you out around at industry events, because I do think you are someone that is reflective of the consciousness of these plants. Like, you're always smiling. I don't feel this massive ego from you. You're always just, down to chat and hang out. And I love that. And that's like what we're trying to do, is just find like the Joe Moores of the world. And as we were talking about before, the Los Ariases, and just the beautiful people in this industry, and just remind everyone that there's so many of us that want to be of service, that want to live a different, fuller life, that know that we can invite more kindness into our interactions. And it's no longer like this. I got told a lot as a little girl that I was too idealistic, and that, my dreams were not possible, and this is a cruel and hard world, and I would need to harden up. And that was true in some sense of the world, but I really just, I'm returning back to that, as Leonard said in Sedona, Leonard Picard, to return to the natural mind. Just return to the natural mind, where everything is awe-inspiring, and we're alive on this planet, and we get to love each other. And we also get to steward people outside of unnecessary suffering.
Right. And I'll acknowledge, like, we're pretty privileged, right? So
absolutely,
like this is what I hope the vanguard is for the future for a lot of people. Not just really cruel, cutthroat business, but it's like, the fact that we get to interact like this comes from, many years of struggle. And it is what I hope the future is.
absolutely.
And the way you were describing it, Kim, it sounded like, the hippie vision from the 60s of, flower children, everybody being in a peaceful arrangement. And, I want to encourage people to think that we can have it all like that. Not everybody, even those of us in the business, we don't necessarily care about super luxury, being super rich. It's like, this is a means of which we can change the planet, the course of history. Yeah. And we can do it in a kind-hearted, amazing way when we find the right folks, kind of the find the others thing.
Absolutely. And that's why I feel, talking about privilege, it is such an honor to be in a place to be able to sit with these plant medicines. And there's no other choice to me than to be an honorable steward of them, because the massive potential they have to support humanity through this very clear forest fire that we are going through, right? There's just this massive forest fire happening right now of just reckoning with the collective shadow, and reckoning with these systems that are so oppressive and just so myopically focused on extracting value and resources out of people and out of the planet. It's just not sustainable. And if we get to be the lucky few that can kind of dive into these plant medicine journeys before most of the rest of the planet, amazing. Then it's our duty and it's our honor to be stewards of those plants and to walk with that frequency and just try and spread the wisdom of these plants by being the embodiment of these plants as much as we can.
Yeah. It's I have a complex relationship with it, and I don't know if I actually even got to talk to you about this, but it's, I'm pretty in on everything you said there. My origin story, I guess my lineage kind of is kind of a mixed bag, but a good portion of it comes from like Soviet Prague.
Wow.
Certainly no like plant medicine tradition there, right? Because it's like Stan Grof, LSD psychotherapy. So it's like Hoffman to USSR to Grof. And, there's all sorts of other interactions there, including some Hindu stuff, some guru stuff with, I think Swami Muktananda was the person's name. So, there's some pretty interesting lineage, but it's, not necessarily directly like plant related until, now, of course. Yeah, I don't know. How does that sound? That sounds pretty weird to me when I say it, but I like have to recognize its truth publicly sometimes.
Oh my gosh, of course. I mean, how I've been, kind of gifted seeing it from a different vantage point is, and we actually now know this is scientifically true through epigenetics, but we hold everything ancestrally in our DNA. Like one strand of your DNA holds more information than every single computer on the planet. And it's just, I think, confronting how intelligent the technology is of our bodies is also going to be confronting to see how much we hold from our ancestors. And hopefully we are the ones to liberate our programming and our bodies of all the pain and suffering and things that maybe these bodies weren't part of, but are definitely part of our lineages and just holding each other really gently as we really start to face a lot of the darkness that has happened and just meet it with light.
Right. Yeah. I think my frame is often like a bit esoteric in origin, kind of hermetic. It's like the underlying unity is really confusing, but it's there. And yeah, like we have access to all of this stuff that's happened in the past and anything we can really imagine. We can have access to it in the forefront of our conscious mind, but it's, sometimes we have to dial in and work really hard to get it, or sometimes it just happens accidentally. And yeah. Have you ever tried holotropic breathwork, Kim?
Yes. And I am welcoming the turn in this conversation because it is so powerful. And what my whole charge about in this life is to remind people that there is no external, you name it, anything that is actually required for you to, you have everything within you essentially to heal yourself and to grant yourself permission and sovereignty and remind yourself of your own power. And I think breath work is one of the most powerful tools to do that because it is a entirely psychedelic experience.
It's been my most consistent thing since 2003. I've had a break for a few years now on account of COVID, but it's one of my absolute favorite things to facilitate. I can't call it holotropic breathwork legally. There's some trademark issues there, but it looks very similar. We'll put it that way.
Patenting a way of breathing. I love it. That's Matrix stuff 101.
It becomes bad when they start to protect it.
Right.
Just like anything, right? Yeah. I actually, this is a really cool conversation too. Like, how do we do patenting appropriately? I have no idea how to do that, but it's, sometimes we need to protect things from groups that might misuse things. And patenting is apparently one of a few ways we can do it.
Mm-hmm.
We'll get around to that eventually, sorting all that stuff out, but
hopefully
it's complex. I'm sure you've seen plenty in cannabis too.
Yeah. Unfortunately, not my wheelhouse, but I agree. It's a very interesting conversation of how we do that with integrity.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Holotropic breathwork and like these different non-ordinary state, non-drug methods, being able to kind of bring around these very similar, if not identical experiences is, I think, just a really cool reminder that it's all in your body. Like you have generated these things and you don't necessarily need exotic things, And
it's so accessible too. It's, it really just takes your willingness to sit, which is a lot for some people, but to sit alone and or in community and just breathe in a consistent pattern for 40 minutes, an hour. And it might be super uncomfortable and you're really being confronted with all types of thoughts, but even on a scientific level, that getting your breath moving in a knowable pattern, it's like a whole nervous system reset. Because if there are patterns or narratives in your body or in your mind that you can't escape from, it gives your body this thing to do, which is what your mind is always looking for. It's just your mind is always looking for a task. And giving your mind this patterned breathing for an hour is just so massively powerful. And you can kind of go beyond the mind, and not every breathwork experience has been this psychedelic trip for me, but more importantly, I think it has been this pattern interrupt. And even just breathing and energizing your body with life force, with this very thing that we can't see, but we know is sustaining us. Most people are not breathing properly. We're not breathing into the deep lower part of the lungs where we get energized the most. We're mostly shallow breathing, which kind of still signals to the body that we're in fight or flight. So even, teaching people the importance of just deep breathing is like one of the most powerful things you can give to someone.
Right. And it kind of circles back to the accessibility of cannabis and mindfulness and just paying attention to what's going on in your body here.
Mm-hmm.
Because again, a couple inhalations of cannabis and you start doing these breathing explorations and you're going to notice some really interesting things about your body, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Or you just do it without cannabis too. There's all sorts of like apps, right? And like an explosion of tools to help us figure this stuff out. And couldn't have come any later, I don't think. Like we need it now. We need to like figure out what's going on inside of us so we can steward what's going on outside of us well.
Absolutely. I always say, introducing people to the fact that there's this internal landscape is the most radical thing you can do in a world that just consistently wants you focused on the external. And most people are not even aware that there's this whole eternal internal landscape of answers, of just so much power to be tapped into. And it's so smart of society to program us to think that this is like hippie or woo-woo, because then it keeps us from wanting to be seen that way, right? I mean, our biggest value as a tribal species is how we're viewed by our peers. So no one wants to be viewed as, someone that believes in something that's insane or, kind of viewed as not intellectual or whatever the programming around this stuff might be. And that's why I think there's such an importance to like coherently talk about these things. And like I said, in the beginning part of my plant medicine journey was to feed that quantitative piece of my mind that wanted to feel it was analytical and it was smart and there was backing behind it. Now, thank God, I've completely released that attachment and I'm willing to just play and have fun with life, regardless of what people think is normal or not. But yeah, it's so important to realize that the external projections of violence and suffering we're seeing is because we haven't looked at the violence and suffering in our inner dialogue. And that is putting a lot of radical ownership on the individual, when I know that there are systems and forces at play to kind of keep that happening. But truly, the biggest gift we can give this planet is to heal ourselves, because then we're not contributing to this massive cloud of just, projecting our shit onto the world.
Yeah, exactly. There would be an amazing Carl Jung quote right here about the shadow and how that's kind of our primary responsibility. It's like figuring out our relationship to that, and then, trying to act with more intent in the world. It's a lot more consciousness, and psychedelics can help. Cannabis can help. All these other, non-drug modalities can also help plenty.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's going to be a big process and a big reframe, but we can do it. And hopefully it helps us manifest so much kindness.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, Kim, I think we're just about at time. Is there anything you want to throw out, like link-wise or acknowledgements or anything like that? Or when is the next Trailblazers even?
Yeah, sure. The next Trailblazers, we're doing our first condensed, typically they're 2.5-day to 3-day retreat style events that are in beautiful locations as we follow, the best practices of plant medicine. We're kind of putting that into how we structure our events. So set and setting is everything to us. How do we get people really dropped in and present, especially in an industry that requires so much hustle and so much grind and just constantly being on email, constantly being on the phone? How do we really get people to lean in to a 2.5-day space? And you do that by creating a container that is so beautiful, like Sedona or Utah or Ojai. And you do it by getting the best people in the industry. So everyone you meet, either professionally or personally, has the capacity to radically improve your life or, even your business. And it's not out of like this transactional, what can you do for me? What can I do for you? It's out of just wanting to be honorable stewards of these medicines that have improved our lives and have the potential to improve the world. So condensing all that magic has been our challenge over the past couple months preparing for New York, but we're just super excited to come to New York and get on the East Coast and see all the exciting things happening there. And how do we do it right as leaders in the industry? How do we come together and make sure that, we're not coming from a scarcity mindset, that there's enough for everyone to eat in this industry. And we do it by not doing business like we've been taught to in other industries. And New York is going to be a 1-day full experience, 9 a.m. to midnight at Tribeca 360, July 27th on a Wednesday. And it's going to be packed with all the typical things that, people love about Trailblazers is intentional networking, authentic connections, wellness, really beautiful, hard conversations, not the typical circuit that you hear, at most conferences, but really authentic and honest conversations and hard questions from people who have the most power and influence in the industry. So we're just super excited about that. And then we have our event in Ojai, California, October 10th to 12th at the Ojai Valley Inn. So just super excited about those, and just getting the community together, I consistently find is the most reinvigorating part of this job. And just having bright minds and big hearts in one space is so powerful. And it's really what we do best.
Well, amazing. And I really hope to be there in Ojai. And I'll be sending some people to New York.
Beautiful.
Yeah. Kim, so thank you so much. And I really hope we can do this again.
Yeah, me too, brothers. It's always a joy. And I'm so glad we got to see each other in Stowe. And, it's always a joy when we run into each other. And thank you for being, what I see as an honorable steward of this medicine.
Amazing. Amazing. Thank you. And there you have it, Kim Dudine. I hope y'all enjoyed that and learned some things. It's a different way of thinking about this content. So really important stuff. If you want to learn more, reach out to Kim. Maybe go to Trailblazers. And I think that's it for now. Hope y'all have a great rest of your day, and we'll see you on the next episode. This is Joe Moore signing off. Bye-bye.